the way you put things down. But in the same respect, I'm looking to have everyone use this same system in order to have a structured system of drawing and painting so that you are going to learn the most that you can out of each step that you're taking. To stop it at a little sketch and a little outline that you think, yeah, I got that person. Let's take this further, because the further that you can take this system of drawing and painting, the more that you are taking a whole separate course within yourself. It's giving you a whole workshop each time that you do a portrait by having that system that you can go to. And it just takes you further. And it takes you further into studying visually so that you are able to take your heart and let that be part of your work. It's not just up here, it's here too. But it takes time to do this part if you don't know this part. Okay? It takes time. So you then build up that drawing the second time with either a 283, which is basically the same value. It wasn't at the beginning of New Pastels. That was a darker value. It is no longer a darker value. It's pretty much the same, but it's slightly different color. So that could go next. You test your own lightness in your touch on the paper. You look and see how heavy you are. If you fill up the tooth of the paper too much with your drawing, flick it out, shake it out, and let it be. You don't have to go in and erase each time. And by erase, it's not your normal erasing. It is taking your kneaded eraser, pulling it out, kneading it out, letting it be clean, and then molding it into the cleanness and putting it down on your paper to lift up. That's what it is in pastel. Now, the next step is to look at your image again. Look at the lines. Maybe you have a sweeping line that goes from one side to another, and you haven't taken the time to go in there and find out the separate areas that it really is the direction of line that it's taking in there, especially in folds. In folds, people and that's another good course for you, and a creative thing for you to do is to do a still life of just folds, because it helps you in the cheeks, it helps you in the areas of the hair, it helps you in everything else that you're doing, in the collars, in the clothing of a portrait. So that's another thing that you can do for yourself. And do it wisely. Do it in steps. Get into it. Find yourself submersed in that object that you're drawing. It's another level of drawing that you can become involved in and find really excitement in looking at the lines and the angles and the curves and the compositions. Composition key. We went into that. Do thumbnails at the beginning. Really look at that composition and make sure that composition holds well. And there is a certain amount of cropping in you can do in order to make that work after you've already done something. But you want to plan that ahead, because that's another part of your brain that is composing. It's like someone writing music. They're going to compose this, and they're going to write this music in a certain way. And if they just go in there and start playing and say, "Ooh, go back," and no, there's parameters, and there's something that you can go to make sure that you really plan that composition. Then you go into your drawing. The third dark brown that you use is probably what I would say is probably the most important transition. This is the 293. This is a darker brown, the darkest you've used. And this one is bluish. It's cooler. It's darker than what you have used before. So at this stage, you have looked at this portrait 2 times. You've studied the lines, the angles. You've studied some of the shadows that the forms have. Each form, your nose, your cheek, your lips, your chin, your forehead, they all have a form. And that has a shadowed effect just because of the form. But now you have light that's coming onto the form. And so that's dictating to you where the light is coming from and how the form is going to be shadowed because of the light. So there's two things you have to keep in mind. And then you're looking at cast shadows from the form onto the rest of the face. Cast shadows from eyelashes, perhaps, or eyelids. Cast shadows from the nose onto the face. Lips might cast a shadow. And certainly underneath the lip, where it goes down to the chin, there's a shadow that is showing the form, but might also have a cast shadow. And definitely underneath the neck. So you're looking at cast shadows as well as shadows of the form. That is the step that is really important to make any corrections, and go back to your easel, shaking yourself out, getting yourself alert. If you have to walk outside, come back in. If you have to exercise a little, get the blood circulating, and go back to that drawing with the intention of making any corrections that you need to make in your drawing, and then at the same time outlining the shadow patterns of the form as well as the cast shadow. So you are outlining shadow patterns lightly because your intention is to connect as many shadow patterns in your portrait, going from the head to the forehead, the eye socket, down the nose, down to the lips, and cast onto the cheek, and then the chin, and then underneath, going down to the shadow on the neck. You're looking for a whole shape, and this takes squinting your eyes to do it. You can't be wide open looking at every reflected color and light that's going back into your shadows. At this point, you want that whole you want that whole shadow pattern, and that's going to make a very big part of your composition. Aside from the objects that are there, it's going to be that cast shadow, and that gives you that emotion. That shape pattern is really important, and it will also make shapes in the negative space as well. And sometimes it's just a delightful accident that happens with those shapes that are in the negative to enhance your piece. At that point, you want to take that whole shadow that you've outlined and mapped out, and you want to keep that pattern together. And in doing that, I use a lined form of my pastel so that the lines are very close together, but not closed. And they're very close together and in a very uniform pattern. And you do not have to go from the beginning of that shadow to the end with one stroke. You can do it as much as your hand feels comfortable, then you do it again as much as your hand feels comfortable. If you are uniform in your strokes, and you develop this, if you're uniform, and I don't care whether you go up and down, I don't care whether you go back and forth, I don't care whether it's horizontal, but get that all in there so that it looks all together. There's no dark outline of the shape,